And now come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Kotar. Alderwoman Rice. Alderman Gunther. Alderman Vollmer. Alderwoman Martin. Alderman Ornowitz. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Green. Alderman Odenberg. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Muhammad. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaquero. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderwoman Navarro. President Reed.
Here.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderwoman Martin. Alderwoman Green. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Vaquero. Alderman Cone. 17 present.
Quorum being present, we will be led today in prayer by Pastor John Watson from Maple Temple Church of God in Christ.
All the paths of the Lord are mercy and truth unto such as keep his covenant and testimonies. Gracious God, Heavenly Father, the creator and sustainer of life, without your blessing, all our labor is in vain. We pray that our lives and the life of our community may be built upon the rock of eternal truth and everlasting love, so that we may dedicate ourselves again to you in body, in mind, and in spirit. Fill us with nothing but the best in thought and life, and keep us restless until we find rest in you. Lay your hands in blessing upon all our elected officials and all our people, to look to you as the fountain of all wisdom and the source of all strength. Allow your mighty spirit to surge through us and our citizens, translating our lofty principles into living practices and gracious words into good works. Into your hands we commit our families, ourselves, our communities. Amen.
Let's give Pastor Watson a round of applause and thank you for always coming down to grace us and kick us off right with a prayer. We're going to start with our courtesy resolutions calendar. Alderman from the 18th, recognized on the motion of our courtesy resolutions calendar. Recognized for the motion on our courtesy resolutions calendar, Alderman from the 18th.
Mr. President, members of the board, I move for adoption of the courtesy resolution calendar.
Moved by the Alderman from the 18th, seconded by Alderman from the 26th and 27th, and a little bit everybody. It's a good start. We're going to start with a resolution we're starting with a resolution for the St. Louis internship program. I'll ask this board of directors and the students to please approach the dais. Mr. Alderman from the 18th, if he'll join us here at the dais also. Alderman from the 17th, would like to join us. And we really can't talk about education without having, a former principal in the school systems to join us. Alderwoman from the 14th, please join us up here at the dais. Alderman from the 17th, would you like to lead us off, or would you want me to lead? No, you go right ahead. I am honored to have the St. Louis Internship Program and its board of directors join us here today. Over the years that this program has run, it has mentored over 4,000 kids. 98% of those kids go on to finish high school, and 90% of them go on to college. And that is success. And I cannot thank them enough for their continued commitment. They started in the wake of the Rodney King incident in Los Angeles. And since that time, they've been working to enrich the lives of young people all across the city of St. Louis. Over 26 years now, SLIP has been in operation. So on behalf of the Board of Aldermen and the City of St. Louis, I want to just offer you my sincere thanks and also congratulations on a job well done. Let's give them a big round of applause. Alderwoman.
As a former educator, teacher, administrator, I know firsthand how the internship program affects high school students. This program provides them with a window on the working world and helps them make some valuable decisions as they're formulating their life plan, and gives them experience, real life experience in the world of work. I know, several of my former students that served in the St. Louis Internship Program, and it was a invaluable experience for them and provided them with the foundation they needed to become productive citizens in the future. So I recognize the St. Louis Internship Program and its value to our students and our city.
Alderman from the 17th.
Feels sometimes like it's hard to improve on things that have already been said, but obviously internships are a wonderful introduction into the workforce, and there is nothing like a job to go ahead and stabilize our city, give people a sense of purpose, and make great citizens out of them. And the role of internships is a great pathway for that to happen, and it's great that we have such a fine organization leading that effort here in St. Louis. Thank you.
Alderman from the 18th.
Mr. President, members of the board, I'd like to congratulate them on the fine work that they have done and the contributions that you've made to the city. It is significant that you're standing here today, and you deserve the accolades that you're getting from members of this board. The resolutions that are passed here become a part of the record of this city, and therefore your work goes into the history of this city. And so we thank you on behalf of this Board of Aldermen of all your contributions to this city. And hopefully by this small token of that piece of paper, you're inspired to do a lot more.
Yes.
Hope to see you. Thank you very much.
Alderman from the 22nd.
As members of the board, I'd like to also say congratulations to SLIP. My wife and I and my daughter were beneficiaries to the program they have. Kayla matriculated through the SLIP program, had a wonderful internship at Emerson last year, and she's on to Jackson State University now. And it's because of a lot of good work that you guys did in helping her make that transition to college. So thank you so much for what you've done for my family and what you continue to do for the city of St. Louis.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Well, I want to bring up to the mic now Shanice Johnson, the Executive Director of the program.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for allowing the St. Louis Internship Program to be here. I'm joined at the dais with our board chair, Mr. Kelvin Westbrook, Our program specialist and proud alumnus, Danielle Anderson. We have our newest staff member, Praisey Isaac, who's joined us recently. Lynn Ann Vogel, who is our vice chair. You have Mr. Mark Levison, who was actually one of our founding chairman of the board and just serves as our board member and my person I can call. Thank you. And we have two wonderful St. Louis Public School students. We have Alec Ritchie Kendrick and Holly Ballantyne, who's joined us today. Again, thank you for allowing us to be here and to share the St. Louis internship program with you, as we understand that this program is year-round, so it keeps our students engaged. So that's a very, very good way to fight crime, but also help them be productive, tax-paying citizens. So with your support, we can be around for another 50 years. Thank you. So we always teach our students to be ready, and so we have some time for them to give remarks. So I'm going to ask Alec, would he come to the podium? Alec is a junior, and please tell them about your experience.
Good morning. My name is Alec Ritchie Kendrick, and I am a junior at Metro Academic and Classical High School. And the program provided me with an internship paid at a law firm downtown, Schlichter, Bogart, and Denton, where I was also able to meet Senator Chuck Schumer, which was very exciting this summer.
And we also have Holly Ballantyne, who's with us. She is a junior as well. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Holly Ballantyne. I attend Collegiate School of Medicine and Bioscience, and I am a junior. Having this SLIP internship program, it's very helpful. Not only does it give me college readiness, but also gives me professional development with the training that we do every Saturday. It gets me ready for the summer internships, which I was lucky enough to have a paid internship at Emerson Electric Company, and I got to make connections that I'll have for a lifetime.
I don't know about all of you, but that makes me feel good. Alderwoman Davis, would you like to approach the dais now?
Good morning. The internship program is near and dear to my heart because as a young person in St. Louis, we had a program called Neighborhood Youth Corps. And they took us and placed us in various businesses, nonprofits, and others to give us firsthand experience on real life and how people were served and how businesses were run. And I had the great experience of being at the Human Development Corporation. And to those of you who know the Honorable Betty Thompson and others who worked with that program for years, that's how I learned that you can serve people and you need to understand their plight and not just think about yours. But when we brought up the St. Louis internship program, what was unique about it, this guy back here, Mark Levinson, he understands because he's been with it a long time, is that yes, young people need to work, but they need to have meaningful work experiences. So yes, we had Operation Brightside and all those programs, but they're going to be ready. When they go to college, they'll have a different insight about what the real world is about. So I applaud you. You always look sharp in your jackets, and I just love it. So when we see them here at City Hall, we always get some every year. Make sure you reach out for an extra moment or two, but most especially understand that we would like to show them a better way to understand what life is really about and not just see all the turmoil that they're witnessing now, but know how to really serve and understand this planet that we're on. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Just finally, I'd just like to thank the board of directors and also congratulate the students and wish them well in their future endeavors. Think about it, 98% of them finish in high school and over 90% of them going on to college. That is a huge success. We had an opportunity to hear from 2 of them today, and I tell you that makes me feel so great just to hear their thoughts and hear some of the things that they're working on. This resolution is but a piece of paper, but it is the highest honor the board has to give any organization or individual. And what it does, it cements in time some of that organization's many contributions up until this point in time. So that 100, 200 years from now, when you read about the rebirth of our city and go back and research the history of our city, amongst those records, they're going to see St. Louis Internship Program. And they're going to know that we pause this day to recognize you for the job well done and recognize the role you played in the rebirth of our city. Let's give them a big round of applause and congratulations. We're going to line up for a couple folks. I won't forget. It's been moved and seconded that we adopt our courtesy resolution calendar. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. With that, we'll return to our regular order of business. Introduction of honored guests. Any introduction of honored guests? Alderman from the 21st. Go.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to welcome to our chambers our sheriff of the city of St. Louis, Vernon Betts, and also his captain, Captain O'Toole, with the Sheriff's Department, as well as Mr. Percy Green III with fire.
Welcome. Alderman from the 22nd.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, I'd like to have as my honored guests Chris Pickle with AT&T, Sheila Jones with Ameren, Missouri, Clint McBride with the local laborers union, and Kelly McBride with Kelly Group. Not Kelly McBride, Megan McBride.
There you go. Alderman from the 8th.
And would like to remind everyone to please go get your flu shot. Welcome back, Charlie.
Alderman from the 4th.
President and members of the board, I'd like to have my special guest today, Pam Boyd, Sharon Tyers, and Maurice Falls.
All right.
And I'd like to thank everybody for coming out Saturday for me for my dedication service, especially Gunther, Spencer, and Rice. They showed up and showed out. They almost got the Holy Ghost. We had a good time at church. And I appreciate everybody that came out and helped me celebrate today. Thank you.
All right. Alderman from the 26th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to have as my honored guest today, Mr. Justin Eidelberg of the 26th Ward. He was here, but, and go ahead with the Alderman of the 4th. Thank you.
All right, Alderman of the 4th.
Marlene, at the end of the day, Davis.
All right, Alderman from the 13th.
President, members of the board, I said, first of all, I'd like to, I'm happy to notice that the Alderman from the 4th Ward is feeling so much better. It's nice to have him back.
Yes, it is.
And I'd like to have as my honored guest Jeff Hans from the Carpenters Regional Council. Thank you.
All right. Alderman from the 27th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to welcome my guest, Frederick Searcy, with Plumbers and Pipe Fitters, Local 562.
Alderman from the 14th.
Good morning, Mr. President and esteemed colleagues. I'd like to have as my honored guests Demetrius Alfred, President of Firefighters Local 73, Nathan Lett, Firefighters Local 73, Clinton McBride from Laborers Local 110, and Megan Shackelford from the Kelly Group. Oh, wait a minute. One more, Steve Spreck from Communication Workers of America.
Welcome, Steve. Any further introductions? Any further? Alderman from 12th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to introduce as my special guest our farmer clerk, Dave Sweeney. And I'd also like to welcome the alderman from the 4th back. And an update on the alderman from the 23rd. He came home yesterday, so he's at home resting.
Any further introductions? Any further introductions? Alderman from the 10th, like to wrap us up.
They're having the Potsdam conference at my microphone, so. Welcome here to October 26th. On this day in 1949, Harry Truman raised the minimum wage from 40 cents to 75 cents to get a payment. That's when I was working. In 1971, Al Green had the #1 hit, Tired of Being Alone, and Welcome to Frankenstein Day. But more importantly, to piggyback on the alderman, our good friend is home, the alderman from the 23rd, and I talked to him. The operation was a success. They carefully and successfully removed the case of ramen noodles from his heart blockage, so he's doing much better now. Thank you.
All right. Anything further? Any further introductions? Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on approval of the minutes.
Mr. President, members of the board, I move for approval of the October 12th minutes.
Move from the 18th, seconded by the Alderman from the 12th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Report of city officials.
Report of city officials can be found in A, B, and C of the agenda and have been placed in the alderman's mailboxes. Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for appointment as the Poet Laureate for the City of St. Louis as recommended by the Poet Laureate Task Force. The appointment of Ms. Jane Ellen Iber, who resides in the 8th Ward as the Poet Laureate, whose term will begin April 1st, 2019 and expire March 31st, 2021. The appointment of Ms. Shirley LaFleur, who resides in St. Louis County as the Poet Laureate and whose term will expire March 31st, 2019. I respectfully request your approval of the appointments. Sincerely, Louis E. Reed, President, Board of Aldermen.
Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on the appointment to the Poet Laureate.
Mr. President, members of the board, I move for approval of the appointments.
Been moved by the Alderman from the 18th, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We dispense with line item 7. Would anyone like to take any bills off of any of our informal calendars? Alderman from the 17th, you recognize.
Mr. President, I rise to take Resolution 104, Committee Substitute, as amended. However, I believe there's going to be a floor substitute for this. And last week I missed the opportunity to bring it up now, so I'm rising to make sure that we don't lose another week on this. So they're working on it now.
We'll put it, we'll place, Madam Clerk, please place Resolution 104, Committee Substitute, as amended at the end of our resolutions calendar.
So noted.
Would anyone like, from 22nd?
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, I'd like to move Resolution 101 to the second reading calendar.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that. Place Resolution 101 at the tail end of our second reading resolutions calendar.
So noted.
Would anyone like to take any further bills or resolutions over any of our informal calendars? Would anyone like to take any further bills or resolutions off of any of our informal calendars? We will dispense with line items 8 through 10, first reading of board bills.
Board Bill 149, sponsored by Alderman Bosley, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Public Service to amend and make technical errors to Ordinance 70524, which vacated above surface, surface, and subsurface rights for vehicle, equestrian, pedestrian travel in several streets and alleys bounded by St. Louis Avenue on the north, 22nd on the east, Cass on the south, and Jefferson and Portnell on the west in the city, and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 150, sponsored by Alderwoman Ingracia, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Public Service to conditionally vacate above surface, surface, and subsurface rights for travel in the 10-foot wide north-south alley, the remaining portion of 10-foot wide east-west alley, and the 25-foot wide north-south alley in City Blocks 2273 as bounded by Union Pacific Railroad, 21st Gratiot and 22nd, and a portion of Gratiot beginning at 134.01 feet east of 22nd and extending 73.5 feet eastward to portion of Gratiot previously vacated by Ordinance 65340 in the city. Board Bill 151, sponsored by Alderman Bosley, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Public Service to conditionally vacate above surface, surface, and subsurface rights for vehicle, equestrian, and pedestrian travel in the 15-foot wide east-west alley beginning at Salisbury Street and extending westwardly 1.25 feet to the 20-foot wide north-south alley in City Block 1174 as bounded by 19th, Malincrot, 20th, and Salisbury in the city, Missouri, as hereinafter described in accordance with Charter Authority in conformity with Section 14 of Article 21 of Charter and imposing certain conditions on such vacation. Board Bill 152, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, pursuant to Ordinance 68937, an ordinance authorizing the honorary street name of Reverend Dr. W.H. Goatley, Jr., which shall begin at the section of North Leffingwell and Franklin and run west on Franklin to the intersection of T.E. Hundley and Franklin. That is the extent of first reading of board bills.
Reference to committee.
To the HUD's Committee, Board Bill 137. To the Health and Human Services Committee, Board Bill 140. To the Streets Committee, Board Bill 149, 150, 151, and 152. That is extent of reference to committee.
Second reading.
The following bills were reported out of the Street Committee. Board Bill 108, sponsored by Alderwoman Boyd, an ordinance directing the Director of Streets to permanently close, barricade, or otherwise impede the flow of traffic on east-west alleyway in City Block 5000, bounded by Robin, Lillian, Riverview, and Theodore at a point on said alleyway that is approximately 10 feet southeast of the east curb line of Theodore Avenue and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 128, sponsored by Alderman Moore, an ordinance establishing a two-way stop site at the intersection of Warney and Lexington, regulating the traffic traveling northbound and southbound on Warney at Lexington and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 134, as amended, sponsored by Alderman Williamson and Moore, pursuant to Ordinance 68937, an ordinance authorizing the honorary street name Frank Williamson Senior Way, which shall begin at the intersection of Enright and Union and run east on Enright to Arlington. Board Bill 135, as amended, sponsored by Alderman Williamson, pursuant to Ordinance 68937, an ordinance authorizing the honorary street name Thelma N. Williamson Way, which shall begin at the intersection of Arlington and Clemens and run north on Arlington to the intersection of Arlington and Windermere. The following board bills were reported out of the Transportation and Commerce Committee. Board Bill 120, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, and ordinance recommended and approved by the Airport Commission, the Board of Public Service, and the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the Director of Airports, the President of the Board of Public Service, and the Comptroller to enter into and the memorandum of agreement for expansion of the improvements to inbound baggage system and facilities Terminal 2 at St. Louis Lambert International Airport that would memorialize the agreement between the city and Southwest Airlines Company containing a severability clause and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 121, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, and ordinance recommended and approved by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the Director of Airports and Comptroller, owner, and operator of St. Louis Lambert Airport, International Airport, to enter into and execute the concession agreement AL-252 between the city and Avenco LLC, granting concessionaire certain rights and privileges in connection with the occupancy and use of the premises containing a severability clause and containing an emergency clause. The following board bill was reported out of the HUD's Committee. Board Bill 122, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, and ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing the mayor and the city to submit 2019 Annual Action Plan to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development as required to apply for funding under the Federal Community Development Block Grant Home Investment Partnership, Emergency Solutions Grant, and Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS Entitlement Program. That is the extent of second reading.
We will dispense with line item 14, perfection consent.
Board Bill 132, sponsored by Alderman Arnowitz and Gunther and President Reed, an ordinance authorizing and directing the Director of City Department of Health, Mayor of the City, and authorized grantee official to enter into and execute a cooperative agreement award with the United States Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs to fund the St. Louis Opioid and Homicide Prevention Command Center. Board Bill 123, committee substitute, sponsored by Alderwoman Ingracia, an ordinance authorizing the sale of certain real property owned by the city and located in city blocks 2007 and 2008, and containing a severability clause. This ordinance authorizing and directing the mayor and comptroller to execute upon receipt of and in consideration of the sum of $650,000 a quitclaim deed release and forever quitclaim unto 2200 Washington LLC, whose address is 1425 18th Street, St. Louis, Missouri 63104, certain owned property located in city blocks 2007 and 2008. Board Bill 130, as amended, sponsored by Alderman Vollmer, an ordinance approving the petition to establish the Lacona Community Improvement District, establishing the Lacona Community Improvement District.
Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on the motion for the perfection consent calendar.
Mr. President, members of the board, I move for adoption of the perfection consent calendar.
Moved by the Alderman from the 18th. Entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 13th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
That is extended perfection consent calendar.
Board bills for perfection.
We have none.
Madam Clerk, please place Board Bill 124 on the regular third reading calendar, at the end of the regular third reading calendar, at the request of the Alderman from the first.
So noted.
Third reading consent.
We have none.
Third reading report of engrossments.
Board Bill 6, as amended, floor substitute, sponsored by Alderwoman Howard and Murphy, an ordinance repealing ordinance 70475, and in lieu thereof enacting a new ordinance to be known as the whistleblower law pertaining to reporting improper governmental action and providing protection from retaliatory action for reporting and cooperating in investigation and or prosecution of improper governmental action, containing definitions, procedures for reporting improper governmental actions and retaliations, and penalties, and containing severability and emergency clauses.
Alderman from the 14th, you recognize on third reading final passage of Board Bill number 6 as amended. Floor substitute.
Mr. President, I move that Board Bill 6, as amended, for substitute, be passed out of the Board of Aldermen.
It's Been moved by the Alderwoman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 1st. Any further discussion? You recognize the close.
I would again like to reiterate that I want Board Bill 6 as amended for a substitute move to final passage.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 14th and seconded by the Alderwoman from the 1st that we third read and finally pass Board Bill number 6 as amended for a substitute. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Kotar. Alderwoman Rice. Alderman Gunther. Alderman Vollmer. Alderwoman Martin. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Green. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Muhammad. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaquero. Alderman Ogilvy. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderwoman Navarro. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Martin. Alderman Muhammad. 23 aye votes and 0 no votes.
By a vote, you sustain the motion. Alderwoman from the 14th and third read and finally passed Board Bill number 6 as amended floor substitute.
Board Bill 124, sponsored by Alderman Ogilvy and Alderwoman Murphy, an ordinance repealing Section 4, subsection 746.010 through 756.040 of Ordinance Number 51871, 51871, approved April 4, 1963, and pertaining to the establishment of the Decent Literature Commission, its organizations, responsibilities, powers, and purposes.
Alderman from the 24th, you recognize on the third read and final passage of Board Bill number 124.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move we third read and final pass Board Bill 124.
Moved by the Alderman from the 24th. Entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 27th and 13th. Alderman, please proceed.
Thank you. Board Bill 124 repeals an ordinance that was passed in 1963, which created the Decent Literature Commission, which was a volunteer commission comprised of 7 members appointed by the mayor, whose role at the time was to help the police in the prosecution of bookstores who were selling what was termed at the time indecent literature, which may have contained sexually explicit passages or whatnot. This was a big movement in the country in the early 60s, which continued probably until the early 1970s. St. Louis County at the same year created their own Decent Literature Commission. And there were, in fact, several prosecutions of bookstores during the 1960s. Most of those convictions were thrown out on appeal. It's an interesting history, but really the point of repealing this ordinance is that we don't use this. There is no Decent Literature Commission today. We have not appointed anyone to the Decent Literature Commission in decades. The most recent reference I can find is the 1980s, and I don't even know if we had appointees in the 1980s. It's unclear. We discovered that we had this on the books when we were looking for annual reports that the Board of Aldermen was supposed to receive, and of course we have not been receiving any annual reports from the Decent Literature Commission because there is no Decent Literature Commission. So this bill would just sort of clean out some old obsolete laws that we aren't using and that I don't think we are ever going to use again, and maybe make room for some new, better laws. Thank you.
All right, excellent. Alderwoman from the 1st.
Mr. President, members of the board, I asked that this be removed from the informal because I was trying to understand what was going on with this. I would like to point out to the member from the 24th that, in fact, we continue to pursue these matters well into when I was on the Board of Aldermen, which was started in 1991. In fact, our former Circuit Attorney, George Peach, pursued people at item. He went after people. So imagine our surprise when, what did he get caught for? But for the very things that he said that should not happen in our city. He was down on Gravois at the little shop there. He was all over worrying about what you sold, what you read, what you did. And there he was under his AKA doing everything that he said was illegal, okay? So it did not stop in the 60s. That was his mission, to eradicate St. Louis of terrible, indecent literature, except for that he was doing everything that he said we should not be doing. That's the definition of a hypocrite. Yet he served, and he stole money from the city of St. Louis, his expense funds to do it. Yet he served not one day in jail. Okay, very interesting to me. That's how our injustice system works. I guess my question was, are we just getting rid of, I'm sorry, Mr. President, if the member of the, Alderman from the 24th Ward would yield, please.
Alderman from the 24th will yield to the Alderman from the 1st.
Of course.
Alderman from the 1st, please proceed.
Okay, Alderman, so this gets rid of the Decent Literature Commission, or does it create something else in its place?
Create anything new. All it does is repeal the 1963 ordinance, and only the ordinance which authorized the Decent Literature Commission. It doesn't touch anything else at all. So
I guess what I got confused was because I didn't understand what the rest of all this paperwork was for. Why didn't we just repeal it? Because then we go into what each thing said, and I think that confused me a little bit, like we were trying to set up something different. So we're just getting rid of it.
that's just the 1963 ordinance. We're just saying we're repealing all that language. Yeah, we're not creating anything new.
All right, thank you very much. This is a very good board bill. Thank you for doing this. There's some more that needs to be done like this, and like I said, especially when you live the history to watch what happened in the city of St. Louis from somebody who was such a hypocrite and who was so hard on everybody else. And, you know, so to worry about what somebody reads in their bedroom is just totally ignorant. And now, as the board bill says, you cannot stop it anyway unless you block the internet from your house and you move to the country. Anything that people want to see, they can. And we're not going to stop it. So this is very well put together. Well, it's a little long. The lawyers added stuff that they didn't need, but okay. But the intent is great, and I want to thank both of the sponsors for doing this.
All right, thank you.
Great, thank you. I think we agree there's some other, we could dig in and find some other stuff that we could probably don't need anymore.
Alderwoman from the 14th.
I just have a comment. I think that I want to recognize the Alderwoman from the 1st for taking us down memory lane. And some of our farcical things that we do here at the Board of Aldermen. I also would say that, you know, we could probably shake out many of the ordinances that we have on our books and maybe, you know, empty the files. But I appreciate the Alderman from the 24th effort on this, and I think that, you know, this is something that we can do and probably will be less controversial than other issues. Thank you very much.
All right,
Alderman
thank you.
Ogilvie.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Alderman from the 24th, you're recognized to close.
Thank you. I renew my motion.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 24th and seconded by the Alderman from the 27th and the 13th. That we third read and finally pass Board Bill number 124. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Cotard. Alderwoman Rice. Alderman Gunther. Alderman Vollmer. Alderwoman Martin. Alderman Ornowitz. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Green. Alderman Odenberg. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Muhammad. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaquero. Alderman Ogilvy. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderwoman Navarro. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Martin. Alderman Vaquero. 24 aye votes.
By your vote, sustain the motion. Alderman from the 24th and 3rd read and finally passed Board Bill number 124.
That is extent of third reading. Report of engrossment.
Report of enrollment.
Board Bill 124-6 as amended. Floor substitute.
All other business being suspended, the President shall in open session affix his signature hereto to the end that these may become law. First reading of resolutions.
Resolution 164, sponsored by Alderwoman Spencer. The Board of Aldermen recognizes and seeks to emphasize through this resolution the significant benefits that the passage of Proposition B will have for the City of St. Louis, and therefore urges the voters of this city to learn more about these benefits and their importance to the economy and safety of the city, and that they exercise their privilege and vote on November 6, 2018.
Alderman from the 20th, you recognize on the first reading of Resolution 164.
President, members of the board, Resolution 164 is a resolution that recognizes the benefits of Proposition D, which will be on the November 6, 2018 ballot. Proposition D is a small increase to our gasoline tax. Our gasoline tax is almost the lowest gasoline tax in the entire country. There's only one state with a lower gas tax in the entire nation. We haven't increased the gas tax since 1996, the year I graduated high school, which is well over 20 years ago. And we have very, very aging infrastructure throughout the state of Missouri, certainly here in the city of St. Louis. This would generate an additional $5 to $6 million locally for the city of St. Louis to address some of our roads and bridges. I want to point out that it is not a perfect tax. There is some funding that goes to the Highway State Patrol, but I do want to point out that the Missouri State Constitution requires that the Highway Patrol is funded out of our gasoline tax. Again, I want to point out that this would be just a good revenue generator for the city of St. Louis. Mayor Sly James, Mayor Leiter Cruson, and our governor all support this. It's a bipartisan effort to improve some of our extraordinarily aging transportation infrastructure throughout the state. And with that, I ask for unanimous consent.
There's been a request for unanimous consent. Hearing no objection, please proceed, Alderman. There was an objection to unanimous consent. With an objection to unanimous consent, if you want to pass this out today, you have to move, suspend the rules, and then move to adopt it.
Mr. President, with that, I would move to suspend the rules and have a vote.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 20th, and we suspend our rules for the purposes of taking up Resolution 164, and seconded by the Alderman from the 12th. Any further discussion? Alderman for the first.
Board. So let's go down memory road again. Okay, this is what happens with history. I'm tired of taxes. That's the first thing I want to say. I am tired of them. My community is tired of them. But also I want to say I have a problem with the Transportation Department of the state of Missouri for the very fact go back and look at how many times, and when's the last time we had somebody from the St. Louis area that's on that commission. And then let's add, even get further to when somebody from the city of St. Louis. I don't care what the governor is, Republican or Democrat, we don't have representation on those commissions and boards. And so for me, giving money and I don't get represented, and in all these years, be it a Democrat or a Republican governor, we don't get representation, I'm hesitant. I also am hesitant. I heard what the Alderman from the 20th said about that we have to fund the highway patrol from that money. But I always find that when we fund people from things like this, they take the money. They take the money from that they were already funding. And I was here when we started gambling. One or two people that voted against the whole gaming thing. The other one was Francis Slay, who used to sit right there. And the whole thing is, oh, this education thing, we're going to do it. Then they went right and took the money away. So I am just getting very tired of voting for stuff, and then they take it, they give it in one hand and take it away in the other hand, and they never put guarantees in that we're going to keep the funding where it is and increase. They just say we're going to use the money, and so that is what make people pause. Not that we don't want to pay our fair share of taxes and we don't want to make sure things happen, but I want them to also make sure people are representative in my community, that being the St. Louis community or the greater St. Louis County community, and not every commissioner be from another part of the state. It makes no sense to me at all. So I am poised to say, send this to committee, let's talk about it. If you're for it, let's look at how we can be inclusive. Thank you.
All right. Alderman for the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I have a little bit of concern. I'm going to be neutral on this, but I have a little bit of concern when we're telling people how to vote out of this chambers with a resolution. I don't think that's appropriate, but as I said, I'm going to be neutral. And to add to the Alderwoman from the 1st, the opportunities that we have for money, and our state representatives, including our governor, refused to take federal money that could have helped us over the years. So there's a lot of problems here, but there's a lot of need. We are at the bottom as far as that gasoline tax is concerned in the country. But at the end of the day, I just don't believe this chamber should be telling people how to vote. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 21st.
Hey, thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I simply oppose the resolution because I think it's weak legislation. When you look at the proposition, it simply says that roughly 30% of the revenue collected will go to local governments, 70% going to the Highway Patrol and state enforcement agencies, but there is no real legislative language to actually dictate how much will go back to the city of St. Louis, in which I'm concerned with, and it does not say to which department that these funds will go to. In the city of St. Louis, we have several different law enforcement agencies, and I think they are equally important. I just think it's weak legislative language. It's another raise on taxes, which I'm not in favor. I salute you for the resolution. I just do not want my name added on to it.
All right. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 20th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to acknowledge a couple things. Again, the amount allocated to the Missouri Highway Patrol is similar to every year in the past. It is mandated by the Missouri Constitution that the Highway Patrol is funded out of a gas tax. The $288 million, that 70% that will go to the state will go for infrastructure. The 30% will come to the state of Missouri, or excuse me, the city of St. Louis. The state constitution, unfortunately, is very clear in what gas tax can and cannot be used for. It has to be used for infrastructure, and it has to be used for highway patrol. So it's a pretty narrow use. I do agree that the state constitution really could and should be amended to be broader, to include public transit and other things. However, it's a real uphill battle. I'll remind the body that the gas tax hasn't increased since 1996. The last time the state legislature tried to fund infrastructure, it was through a sales tax, a general sales tax, which is far more regressive. This allows us to capture income from the interstate truckers that use and abuse our highways and actually do the vast majority of damage to them, and it allows us to capture some income for some of that pass-through traffic. And so for that reason, I think it is certainly not perfect, but certainly better than the other options that we've seen in our recordable history. And with that, I will renew my motion for a vote on Resolution 164.
I did not recognize you to close yet. Alderwoman from the 1st.
Mr. President, if the Alderman from the 20th would yield.
Alderwoman from the 20th will yield to question from Alderwoman from the 1st.
Always.
Please proceed.
Alderwoman, the Alderman from the 19th makes a very good point about us turning down money. We've done that in several things. So, of course, the Republican governor would be supporting this because they turned the money down. Then they tell us, oh, we don't have anything, so this is what we have to do. So, aren't we like, in effect, putting a rubber stamp on saying you can turn this federal money down and then we have to go along with some other kind of way of funding this? And why would we, a democratic community that we are, do something like that?
You know, it's a good question. I stand with the mayor of Kansas City, Sly James, on this, as well as our mayor here. I think that this is not a perfect measure. I do think that our state legislature should do a better job distributing transportation MoDOT funds to urban areas. That is a problem that exists and has existed for decades. The city of St. Louis doesn't get its fair share. However, we don't have a better option on the table, and I am worried that if we don't see this through, that we won't have another option to increase some of the money that we do need for our infrastructure. 80% of the state's highway lanes are more than 25 years old. This is a problem. We have state roads here in the city that are just decrepit. I do agree with the Alderwoman from the 19th that there is a better way for the state to do it. If we want to withhold taxing for the next 20 years, I think we may see some of our bridges fall down. That could be a real problem.
No, so what I want to say to you is I disagree that we don't have a better option. I say that the Republican governor, who was just here saying he wanted to work with us, could go back up in there, take his pen and say, I want to take some of that federal money. That's what you call working together. So I disagree with your statement that we don't have a better option. If you really want to work together with us, take that federal money. That's my federal tax dollars, and I want them to come here. Then you come here and say we still need some more. Then I hear you, because now we're compromising. What you're saying is do it my way, and then you have to go, and that's what he's saying, and that's what the prior Republican governor said. And what I say is we take back the House and we take back the governorship, and then we have a good Democratic governor who understands federal dollars are not a bad thing to have, since we're going to pay them either way.
I would agree that would be an ideal solution. I don't see a path to victory in the next year, and in that time, we're going to continue to see degradation of our infrastructure. I do agree that that would be the ideal solution.
Okay, and what I'd like to just, thank you, I appreciate it. What I'd like to say is that I always want to compromise with people who want to compromise, but when they just want to have it their way and tell me that I have to do it their way, as uncompromising as they are, go back. You didn't even have to run for governor. You got appointed to governor, okay? You were the lieutenant governor. So go back there, sit at your desk, and say, there's a different way to do it. And if the people in St. Louis want to work with me and the people in Kansas City want to work with me, I'm not with the mayors who say, I'll do anything to get it. I'm not with Sly James. I'm not with Lyda Cruz. And I'm with the people who I represent. So take our federal dollars and also look at including someone on the commission that comes from the city of St. Louis. How about doing something like that? Make sure that you acknowledge that the two cities are really Missouri. Okay, you can call it whatever. St. Louis and Kansas City are Missouri. The rest of it is a very wonderful place, because I come from Illinois. I did not grow up in a big city, middle of Illinois. In fact, 3 or 4 of us sit right in a row here, all from middle Illinois. So I do know how it is to be from a small town, but I also know that big cities have big engines, and they ought to be properly represented. And I don't care who you are, Republican or Democrat, you ought to acknowledge that. And you ought to, if you really come here before our chambers and say you want to compromise, let's do some compromise. And so for that reason, I'm not going to support it. I'm going to ask that it be sent back to committee. Let the governor tell us how he can do different things. Come and talk to us. We have an Intergovernmental Affairs Committee. Let them come down and tell us what they're doing to compromise, so that we can charge our citizens taxes while we turn down federal taxes that other states are getting.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. A lot of my concerns with Prop D have already been talked about, but there is one thing that I wanted to point out that when I read through it, I did not initially catch, but was in an op-ed by former Senator Joan Bray just a couple days ago. And it talked about how in this bill, it creates an emergency state freight bottleneck fund. And in theory, it sounds like a good idea. It would fund projects that are $50 million or more that in areas where there's a 20-minute more delay in, during high traffic times. That all sounds like a really good idea. The problem is the way that it sets it up is that the state legislature would then have the ability to take money from general revenue to fund that. And as the senator points out, the big problem with that is then the people the lobbies behind the roads and the bridges would then be able to legally take money out of general revenue that is already slated to go to things like education and mental health and things that have already year after year after year been underfunded. And there probably is a very good chance of that happening if we open up the ability for general revenue to be accessed in this way. So I think that's very concerning. To me, it's a poison pill for Proposition D, and that is a lot of the reason for my concerns as well. So I applaud the Alderwoman for the 20th for doing this. We're on opposite sides of this issue, but thank you for taking the time and bringing this through.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 20th, seconded by the Alderman from 12th, that we suspend our rules for the purposes of taking up resolution number 164. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Kotar. Alderwoman Rice. Alderman Gunther. Alderman Vollmer. Alderwoman Martin. Alderman Ornowitz. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Green. Alderman Odenberg. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Muhammad. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaquero. Alderman Ogilvy. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderwoman Navarro. President Reed.
No.
Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Martin. Alderwoman Howard. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Muhammad.
No.
Alderman Vaquero. Alderwoman Boyd. No. That was 15 aye votes and 9 no votes.
Failed to sustain the motion of the Alderman from the 20th. Alderman from the 20th, where's the Alderman from the 20th? Alderman from the 20th, what you have left before you is to make a motion to refer it to committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to refer Resolution 164 to the Transportation Committee.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 20th that we refer Resolution 164 to Transportation, seconded by the Alderman from the 22nd. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Madam Clerk, please assign Resolution 164 to Transportation and Commerce.
So noted.
Second reading.
And we have 104.
You have 104. All of Tell me when you're ready. Right. Second reading.
Resolution 155, sponsored by Alderman Oldenburg and President Reed. The Board of Aldermen urges the mayor to direct the city chief technology officer to develop a smart city strategy that will include a roadmap for achieving the outcomes of the strategy, establish partnerships with government entities, businesses, and in the community implement said strategy in an equitable manner that ensures equal access to technology and related services and benefits that may result therefrom, and to prepare and present a biannual report to the Board of Aldermen that details the current status of smart city initiatives, which identify current and potential opportunities that city may act upon, and other matters which the chief technology officer may deem relevant or important.
Alderman from the 16th, you recognize on the second reading of Resolution 155.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I move we second read and finally pass Resolution 155.
Moved by the Alderman from the 16th, entertain a seconded by the Alderman from the 22nd. Alderman, please proceed.
Yeah, very briefly, this resolution really gives direction to the Chief Technology Officer and the Mayor's Office to begin a strategic initiative around smart cities. Smart cities being let's harness the technology that exists today and the advancement of technology that we know will exist tomorrow to provide a better quality of life and better city services to our residents and taxpayers. So this board really gives that support and direction, and we look forward to that initiative that's going to continue to be updated and a plan that continue to be monitored by the Board of Aldermen and throughout the Chief Technology Officer's office.
All right, any further discussion? Any further discussion? It's been moved by the Alderman from the 16th, seconded by the Alderman from the 22nd, that we finally adopt Resolution 155. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Resolution 101, sponsored by Alderman Boyd. Enterprise Zone for Union Electric Company, Enterprise Zone for 4301 Rear, 4321, and 4427 Geraldine.
Alderman from the 22nd, you recognize on the second reading of Resolution 101.
Mr. President, members of the board, I move for adoption of Resolution 101.
Moved by the Alderman from the 22nd. I entertain a second on that motion.
Second.
Seconded by the Alderman from the 14th. Alderman, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Ameren, Missouri, a.k.a. Union Electric, is embarking upon an almost $24 million development in the 22nd Ward. Currently, they have a location just south of Burchard and Union, with the address being on Union. And right behind that facility is a warehouse that's underutilized. And they're going to purchase the warehouse, tear it down, and build a much larger facility to combine 3 sites into 1 site. It's a phenomenal process. It's a good project. I've sat with them. We've had communications about minority participation. They're very committed to exceeding 35% minority participation on this $24 million project, and we're just excited to have them staying in the city of St. Louis. They had a lot of options. There was about 50 different locations for them to consider. St. Louis County was our competing competitor. They looked at the I-70 and Goodfellow site. That didn't work out. We were looking to have some retail at that site, and they came back around full circle and realized that right where they currently are was a great opportunity just south of them. So with that, I'm asking for your support of this resolution.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we adopt Resolution 101. Any further discussion? Alderman from the 1st.
Mr. President, members of the board, if the Alderman for the 22nd would yield, please.
Alderman from the 22nd will yield to the Alderman from the 1st. Please proceed, Alderman.
Alderman, the addresses that we are using are 4427 Geraldine and 4430 Union. So that's across, that's north of I-70?
That's south of 70. You know, Matthew Dickey's had the one building years ago right at the corner of Geraldine and Union.
Right.
And then Ameren right now is just south, adjacent to that property.
Okay.
And those are both Union addresses, but the warehouse is actually a Geraldine address.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Right.
kind of confusing.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
one the front faces Union, the other building faces Geraldine.
All right. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 22nd, you recognize the close.
Mr. President, members of the board, I ask for your favorable consideration for Resolution 101.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 22nd, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th that we adopt Resolution 101. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Resolution 104, committee substitute as amended, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, the authority to establish guidelines with regards to the terms of such real estate tax abatement for the residential properties with new investment of less than $1 million based on established criteria.
Alderman from the 17th, you recognize on the adoption of Resolution 104, committee substitute as amended.
Yes, Mr. President, I move for adoption of Resolution 104, committee substitute.
Moved by the Alderman from the 17th. Entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from 24th. Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. President, at this time I'd like to offer a floor substitute, which is a friendly floor substitute that has been proposed by members of the Neighborhood Development Committee under the leadership of its chairman, Alderman from the 25th. And I believe the only change in this is on the last page, or excuse me, the second to last page, and this should be on everyone's desk. And this relates to creating...
Alderman, we have to get it before us first. Would you like to make that motion?
I'd like to make a motion to...
introduce floor substitute.
To introduce floor substitute for committee, for Resolution 104, committee substitute as amended.
Been moved by the Alderman from the 17th, seconded by the Alderman from the 24th, that we introduced floor substitute for Resolution 104, committee substitute as amended. Isn't this on everyone's desk? Is it on everyone's desk?
It's my understanding that it is.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Sit down.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Now what's before us is the floor substitute for Resolution 104.
Mr. President, what I'd like to do is, discuss the entire bill, and then I'll try to identify the slight change that was made. I thought perhaps the easiest way to do this was to answer some basic questions, and when. Starting out with when. This is a process that started over 4 years ago when I became chairman of the HUD's committee. I spent a year trying to understand how those are being used throughout the city. The city actually hired an outside consultant. They prepared a report, made some recommendations, and we have been attempting to implement those recommendations over the last several years. This is kind of a culmination. This morning at the St. Louis Development Corporation, we passed a resolution that will, in essence, put in motion the hiring of a consultant develop an economic development plan for the city. So that has happened today. We have approved it, and we will be hiring an economic development team to help us develop a plan for the city. So very well, this may change a year from now, but this is kind of where we are now, and it's been 4 years in the making. Our committee, the HUD's committee, has other pressing things that we need to begin thinking about. We've had questions about community benefit agreements. We have housing issues that we need to discuss and planning. So we have really been working on this for the last several years. This is, I think, the appropriate pause point so that we can focus on other things. So that's why we're doing it now. As far as who is doing it, 4 years ago, when we were going ahead and doing the economic analysis for projects that were getting incentives, we were contracting all that out. So every time we would do a project, basically everything we would learn would walk out the door. Since that time, we've actually hired 3 financial analysts. We have 2 now working over at SLDC, and I think everyone has appreciated the value that Professor Hollins has brought to the Board of Aldermen. So many of them have helped lead us through this process. I shouldn't say many of them. The 3 of them have helped lead us through this process. The HUD's committee has certainly been involved, and members of the Neighborhood Development Committee as well. So that's who has done it. Why we're doing it? Well, we have, any time that you're providing incentives or economic advantage, there's obviously a lot of concern among the public. So this has been an important thing to try to create as much transparency as possible. The other issue that this, I think, deals with is previously we had 28 aldermen, 28 different points of view, in essence, 28 different economic development plans. This helps us get a single economic development approach or an economic use of incentives approach through the whole city. And the other thing that why this is important is in order to attract investment, we need to provide a predictable outcome. We need, when a developer comes in, they start taking a look at a situation, they work on it for a year, they perhaps spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to get it to the point of bringing it before the public. And then if we are not clear about how our program works and what's available to them or not available to them, we're going to end up with a situation where developers are not going to come to our city, and our city is in great need of continued investment. Now, how does our program work is the next question. We have a map, and the map is designed for projects below $1 million. And it is color-coded, and it identifies the amount of incentives that would be available under normal circumstances, and there are some exceptions. Under normal circumstances, the amount of incentives that would be available based on where the project is located. The vast majority of our projects that come before our board are for smaller projects below $1 million, so this map will be appropriate for them. I should say that this is residential and not commercial, so the map is for residential projects below $1 million. The other aspects of how this works is that we have an economic development model that the staff over at SLDC and their financial analysts have been working on for several years. The model is very complex, and it will be used for residential projects over $1 million and in many of the commercial projects, in most cases the commercial projects. I want to be very clear, everybody should understand this. This map does not mean that areas coded in the map with no incentive, it does not mean that there will be no projects that receive incentive in those green zones. For larger projects, they will still be getting incentives. It's just that we will be using the model instead of the map. And if there's any misunderstanding about that, we need to have that clarified. Now, what are we trying to do? For the last of the questions, what are we trying to do? We're trying to go ahead and reduce the amount of subsidy or provide only the amount of subsidy that's needed to get a project done. This
very clear, I think, in the state statutes that enable all this stuff. The incentives are supposed to be but for. In other words, but for the project, but for the incentive, the project would not move forward. And I think historically, in many cases, the incentives were almost taken as not a privilege, but it was almost an entitlement, and we now have created a process where we think that there is a real but-for test. The map is clear that some of our neighborhoods are more distressed and are clearly need more help, and the model does a very extensive analysis of each project and attempts to ferret out whether or not the project could go forward without the incentive. One of the things that we have been working on very, very hard in designing the economic model was to make sure that the model, that a project came before us, we actually made money on the project. In years past, I think sometimes we incentivized things and we weren't even sure if they're good for the city or not, but because they were entitled to an incentive, or felt they were entitled to incentive, we went ahead and awarded it to them. So now with the model, we have an approach that provides discipline and assures us that we will make money on the projects that we subsidize. Another important thing that we're trying to accomplish, and this is part of the reasons why we are providing additional incentives to projects that actually create economic opportunity for our residents. Job creation is an important component of this, and as a result of that, we want to make sure that we promote development opportunities that create opportunities for our residents. So there's a great deal of attention on making sure that the commercial projects that actually provide jobs move forward. We want to promote development throughout the whole city. Projects, in the strongest neighborhoods are great, but we've all, I think, heard loud and clear that we need to do more for the entire city and not concentrate all of the development in certain neighborhoods. The map is somewhat provides a real visual example of how we're trying to do that. The model, which is obviously much it's less visible. It's not going to provide a visual context, but built within the model, the rates of return necessary in the central corridor or in the stronger neighborhoods are much higher hurdle rates of return, or they're requiring, from the city standpoint, being far more profitable than what a comparable project might be in another neighborhood. The other things that the model does in particular is it's, I think, intended to try to achieve many of the goals that are associated with smart growth, encouraging density and environmental sustainability. It does this by incentivizing projects that are larger and denser, which are more economically are easier to provide services for. And finally, I guess related to all this stuff, and this is why it makes this so challenging, is we're trying to go ahead and figure out how to subsidize projects to get built in the city that otherwise wouldn't, but don't get built in neighborhoods that would take those projects from other neighborhoods or weaker neighborhoods in the city. And I guess the example I would like to use perhaps is something like IKEA. When we were competing for IKEA, we weren't competing with other locations in the city, we were competing with locations in the suburbs. When we built a high-rise on Kings Highway, which many people I know were critical of, that high-rise, the only other area in the region that has high-rise residential is either downtown or Clayton. The notion that high-rise was somehow or another would be built on Carondelet, on the edge of Carondelet Park, I just don't think is a realistic thing. We are not taking residents from other parts of the city to move them into that high rise in particular. So that's what we're trying to achieve in all this, and it's been a interesting process, and I like to think that it was one that was able to slow down and listen to people and their comments, and it's not perfect in any stretch of the imagination, but it is, it's, I think, a big leap forward. The cooperation and attempt at consensus building, I think, is evidenced by the title of the resolution, Committee Substitute as Amended, Floor Substitute, which I think demonstrates our desire to slow down. We've had numbers. Alderman Bosley made some comments in committee that we incorporated in. Alderman Kennedy made comments in committee that we incorporated with it. There were thoughts that were expressed in the Neighborhood Development Committee that were incorporated in it. And so we have, I believe, done the best we can to take all the ideas of the members of our board, bring them together, and have a balanced approach that I hope will diminish the amount of disagreement that we have here. Our city has a great deal of problems ahead of itself, and this is the use of incentives is just one of them. I think we need to come together on these, set of ground rules, move forward, and then hopefully we can start addressing some of the other issues.
Thank you. Alderman from the 24th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to rise in support of this resolution and briefly explain how I feel about it. This map, which I think is a nuanced map with a lot of data behind it and data that can be updated on an annual basis, I think this is like a quantum leap forward in how we decide which projects should have tax abatement and which should not. Heretofore, the process was totally opaque to the public in how this worked. And I think there was, that opacity created great suspicion among the public in how these things were decided. I think this map is just so much better. I have already been showing builders this map. When they say, I'm interested in tax abatement, I say, here's the map. Find your property on the map. There's your answer. The map is backed up by data, not just my opinion, not the opinion of one person at SLDC. And SLDC can administer this map, in a fair way across the city. And I'll point out that probably half the 24th ward, no tax abatement will be available. So we're constraining what is possible there in terms of tax abatement. But I am more than happy to do that because I think this is a fair and equitable plan for how we're going to use these things going forward. That's all I wanted to say. I think this is a type of policy work that is real, it's valuable, it's the kind of thing it was overdue, but I'm very thankful that we have it now, and I think this is a good product that the Board of Aldermen is delivering to the public, and I'm proud that we got here. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 1st.
Mr. President, members of the board, if the sponsor would yield, Alderman from the 17th.
Alderman from the 17th will yield to questions to the Alderman from the 1st.
Yes, Mr. President.
Alderman from the 1st, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Alderman, you talked about the study. Was there a map presented in this study of where all the prior incentives have gone?
If you're asking, I presume there was. I've read the study extensively. It's been several years ago, and I obviously do not have it on my desk at this point, but I'm certain that there has been a far greater concentration of incentives in the Central Corridor, if that's where you're going, Alderwoman.
Thank you. I like it when people read my mind. I don't have to ask all the questions. Exactly where I'm going. I don't have any further questions for him. Thank you very much, Alderman. I do have lots of maps about where all the incentive is going. The whole point of incentives, when you listen to it, is to try to get things started where it was hard to get started, okay? It was not to be where you could just get things done, and it became easier and easier because you got more incentives. So when I hear things like the alderman saying weaker neighborhoods, the reason that the neighborhoods are weaker is because they're racist. This has been built upon racism. Let's not use that term. Let's use it what it is. It's racism. I was building in my ward before I became the alderwoman from the 1st. I was the alderwoman from the 20th. We put $50 million with the new stuff. Most of the stuff that people use in North St. Louis up in that area, I built. I built it when people told me that I couldn't. SLDC, CDA, all those people didn't believe in what we could do. When they got built, they got used. They didn't use a lot of incentive. In fact, most of it was built without any incentive at all. Okay, so I don't believe in just using incentives for no reason. But the 10 years I was gone, nothing got built. That's what racism looks like, that they will tear up something that's successful in the black community and then tell us about what we need, okay? When I hear this perfect plan that everybody's talking about, I look at talking about, let me see what he said, that it has to be profitable. No, it doesn't. Incentives don't have to be profitable, especially in North St. Louis. I don't see why we need to be on this map except to say any kind of incentive we want in North St. Louis until we build our community back up. We ought to get it. Why are you trying to do any kind of limitation at all? There ought to be a big map about where all the people have gotten all of the incentives in the central quarter and downtown, because when I came here in 91, there was no downtown neighborhood per se. They took billions of dollars and put it in downtown and said, we got to do this, we got to save this, we got to do this, we got to do that, we got to do this. But you did it at the expense of where you should have been doing it. And I used to tell the president of the Board of Aldermen at that time when I first came down here, was one Tom Villa. I said, you all are making a giant mistake with what you're doing. You're taking all our block grant money and you're spending it on downtown, the central quarter, and everything else, when you should be building up North St. Louis. There were 4 wards or 5 wards in North St. Louis, because black people know this, because white people don't know that there's a middle income, upper income black people. They think everybody's begging. But here's the thing. The 20th ward, the one that you tore up, was the high income black community. You tore it up and put it into 6 or 7 different communities. Ignorant and stupid. I want to do all your wards just like that. All you all who think that's a good idea, we should do that to the 17th, the 28th, and all the people, 16th. Then you would get what I'm talking about, okay? The 20th, the 21st, the 2nd, the 27th, the 1st, all situated in North St. Louis, comfortable black wards where people were teachers, doctors, and lawyers, okay? Where people made livings and upper income livings. In fact, much of my 20th ward, when I was the 20th ward alderwoman, was not in the quote unquote where we could even get things, okay? Because we made too much money. But people don't act like that happens in black communities, and they most certainly don't care, because the racism doesn't care about how much money you make. They don't care if you're Oprah Winfrey or whoever. The racism continues. So what has happened now is that we have taken all this money and put into all these communities, and now we're coming with this map and these great ideas of how we should limit stuff. But we don't ever come with the map of how we should start with saying we should not give most of the central quarter and downtown not 1 penny and any more incentives. Because if you have not built those communities up now, that's not an incentive, that's a gimme. Incentives was to keep the black middle class in North St. Louis instead of them running out to North County. But if your goal is to control the city, and you want to control the city and keep it white, and you actually put that in newspapers, we're going to be white again. You're not. This is a black city. And so if your goal is something nefarious and underhanded and not to support success, then you come with this stuff. And this is what's happened here over this time. Your goal is not, there's no reason why North St. Louis looks like that. There's no reason why Natural Bridge looks like this, okay? Natural Bridge looks like that because it was a plan with those who were doing it. And they didn't care what it cost, okay? They didn't care what they had to do. Then they say, look at those black aldermen. They're not doing any development. I laugh when I hear the aldermen from the 24th ward talking about fairness and SLDC and CDA. I will bet you that if we get a study of how much time they spend on doing stuff in North St. Louis, it'll be minuscule. They don't spend any time developing anything in North St. Louis. You have to fight, cheat, lie, and steal to get things built in your community. Most of what I got done was keeping it a secret until the last minute so that they could not mess it up, okay? Right now, the alderman from the 3rd has to come down to Natural Bridge and Union to go to the grocery store, he says. Why is that? Because the only Snooks in town is the one that I built, the one that they lied and said they had to have more incentives that I didn't give to them. But there it is, okay? 12 years to get a Walgreens. You know, and this is commercial stuff. Hardly any money spent on residential on purpose. This is people who were in charge. Don't try to put it on the alderman. It's not the alderman that's doing it. Every black alderman that's sitting down here right now wants their ward built up. It was not giving it to us, not doing it fairly, not making sure it happened, and then saying, oh, we're going to work with Terry Kennedy, who alderman from the 18th grade. But he sits right on the edge of the Central Quarter. Everything you do builds up the Central Quarter. Yes, it helps North St. Louis, but it's not the heart of North St. Louis, okay? Same thing with the 19th. No disrespect from them, but that's always been the case, to build up the Central Quarter. And as we come out, well, now we're going to work in the 5th Ward, and we're going to work in the 3rd Ward. But we're not going to work where the population is and where people actually live. And where people are middle and working class, we're going to tear that up on purpose. Then we don't come with these fake studies about what a great job we have done. What we're doing now, this is going to be so fair. No, it isn't. And the problem that has happened down here over the time, and when I say Tom Villa's name, because I had the good fortune of coming back here and talking to him as the alderman from the 11th, and he said to me, Sharon, you told us so many things that were going to happen, and they happened. Because I'm married to a city planner, but a blind person could see, if you take all the block grant money, which, by the way, when you apply for block grant, they tell you about all the ills of the city. So all the ills of the city was in North St. Louis. Normally, when you're applying for money, then you put it back for where you say all the ills. But we applied for the money. We put it on the Chase Park Plaza. In fact, they used the money for the Chase Park Plaza. Then they said, okay, now we're going to pay that money back, because they used it illegally. It was supposed to be for apartments, and they said, no, we're going to do a hotel. Go look it up. You know I'm telling the truth. Joe Rody knows I'm sorry, the alderman from the 17th know I'm telling the truth. They took the money and used it from something else and then put it back. They gave money down to the hotels, and then it went bankrupt. All this kind of things that we have done over the time. Then you act like, what's wrong with North St. Louis? Nothing that them same $1 billion that you have spent in other neighborhoods wouldn't fix in our neighborhood. We don't need any caps. We don't need anything. I haven't noticed any alderman from North St. Louis trying to do anything that was anything remote like what they did with the Chase Park Plaza, okay? They're just fighting. And we fight by pennies. We have to fight each other about pennies, where all the money goes to other neighborhoods. And it's ridiculous. This is not a good map. You don't need to tell me anything in North St. Louis. If I want to do 150% tax abatement, TIF, or anything else I want to do, I ought to be able to do it, because there ought to be a massive incentive plan. South St. Louis, I want you all to hear this. You all had a mass migration of people, not the middle class black people who live in North St. Louis, but people who are maybe lower income. You had that mass migration because of the way they misuse block grant money, okay? And so people take that as racism, when in fact it was the people who didn't have any place to go went where they could rent apartments, where they live next to stores, where they live next to services. The people who own houses, we couldn't get up and leave. Now, I can get up and leave. I just refuse to. I'm going to be here for the long haul. I live proudly in North St. Louis, so I'm not going anywhere. And I'm also not going to let people come and feed me this piece of puff saying how great it is when we do things like this, and then just leave out all the racism and the greed and the corruption that we have had over the years with block grant money and stuff. There is no reason we didn't build housing in North St. Louis. People need housing in North St. Louis. There's no reason that we didn't rehab housing in North St. Louis, because we have a great stock, except for that all the staff and planning was appointed some other way. It was put on something else. If we made the staff have to give us a report about how much time they spent on planning, that would be a more truthful indication of what's not getting done. And I've watched black alderman after black alderman come down here and express frustration about what is happening in their community. Then I hear some young white aldermen come down here and they're like, oh, well, we got these same problems over in the 20th Ward. That was caused because you had a bad alderman. It wasn't because that people didn't try. You had an alderman that wouldn't do the things that needed to be done over there. In fact, fought it. I won't say his name, but older people know who he is. He would not do conservation district. He would not do anything. So that wasn't caused by racism. That was caused by incompetence. But over in North St. Louis, it was caused by racism, okay? And it was caused by people saying that the Central Quarter and downtown and places like that was more important than the rest of the city. And it was also caused by white aldermen who were so scared about black people that they let them point them this way. Guess what? All the things you always scared of happened anyway. And it ain't the Sharon Tyus and Sterling Millers, because if we live next door to you, we're boring. We fix our houses up, and I use us as an example. We don't have behavior problems. We don't have any of that, okay? Because you don't know that there are different socioeconomic groups within every culture. That's something you need to know. And if you don't fix up one part of the city, it affects the other part of the city. I think South St. Louis and North St. Louis aldermen are the dumbest things in the world. I think the Central Quarter aldermen are very smart, because we're so dumb that we fight each other. We're the majority of the city. We should have the most of everything, but we're so busy listening to these few people who represent the Central Quarter that we shoot ourselves in the foot. Okay, we got to stop this, okay? There is some point that we have to stop listening to this bull that people from the Central Quarter come and request that they be accountable for what they've done. You know, and the thing of it is, I was down here for many years, and when people would vote for stuff, there's no harm if you vote to take the block grant money and put it someplace it's not, because you still get your block grant money in the Central Quarter. The person who was voting correctly and saying, no, this is not going to work, they don't get the money. The press doesn't even come back and say, this was a lie, this shouldn't have happened. We went into bankruptcy on the hotel downtown. Knew that, voted no. Even the carpenters was with me. Then I got a chance to come back here in 2013, and the alderman from the 4th was sick, so I took his place while he was sick. And so it was so interesting to see the head of the hotel union come and tell me now that we had to do this we had to do certain things, because even though they were with me and I was right about what was going to happen, but now the hotel is built and we got to do this. We always got to do something for downtown. We had to put $10 million worth of money in the street of Washington when they were building Washington, because before the alderman from the 6th, before it was Lewis Reed, it was Merritt Clark. And when I got here in 1991, she was building up and talking about Washington Street back then and what they were going to do. And then when Clarence Harmon became the mayor, they put $10 million in the streets for cable and fiber optic. Guess what? That stuff is all obsolete now. There is not any ward in the city of St. Louis, in North St. Louis, where we would get $5 million. If we got $5 million on Riverview or Broadway or Natural Bridge, this is all the places that feed the people, and it's our main thoroughfare, we get nothing. And then we're told, oh, fight each other for it. Why? In South St. Louis, you might have mostly some half-decent places now, but if you do not care about what happens in North St. Louis, and you better stop listening to these people that represent and got the most money, because let me tell you, the alderman from the 17th said that I knew where the money went. There is a map that shows you. There is one ward that got more investment than all of us put together. Let you guess which one it is. It only takes 2 seconds for you to know. It's the 17th ward, okay? Got more than everybody put together. Not because he's so much smarter than everybody, because of location, location, location. And ignorance on the part of North St. Louis and South St. Louis aldermen, okay? We are going to have to stop that. We are not going to, I can't let anybody who's been the main problem lead me in anything and tell me about how great it is. No, it isn't. There's a whole, when you look at this map, you should be saying, why does this map look like this? Why does the 20th ward, the real 20th ward, and the 21st ward, and the 2nd ward, and the 27th ward, why do they look like that? Because people invest in their properties. If you go and drive in our wards right now, I drove around all for the last couple of months. Right now, we got grass tall up to our knees. Why is that? Not because the people who live there haven't cut their grass, because the city of St. Louis and the ignorance of Todd Walterman and the mayor's office have decided we don't put enough money in forestry, so we don't cut grass, and then we're going to try to stop. Doesn't make any sense at all. You should be embarrassed to look at this map, all of us. Joe Rody should be, the alderman from the 17th of Sarman, should be the most embarrassed. about it. Because what they want to teach us is that, oh, you're just down here for yourself. No, we aren't. We're down here for an entire city. This is our entire city. And there's something wrong with us that we keep doing this stuff and then we don't get it, okay? We do not get it. We want to blame it on individual effort. This was a concentrated effort. This is a concentrated effort of racism that exists every single day, that created a whole downtown neighborhood instead of feeding the neighborhoods that were already there and needed it. This is not accidental. So when I hear all of this stuff and how great it is, I tell you what, from now on, don't let another. The whole time when he was talking about TIF reform, the Alderman from the 17th, he was pushing TIF through. Look at it. Look at how many TIFs. Just go look under TIF and Alderman from the 17th and see what happens. I do not let the fox guard the hen house, okay? I do not let them lead. I do not let them gather my eggs. I do not let them gather my chicken. When you are the fox doing everything, you cannot tell me how great anything is when you have been part of the problem. I want to be part of the solution. I want to tell you what it can do, and I already know what happens. Give me that $10 million that you put in the streets of Washington. Give that to me. And the alderman from the 21st and I will make next bridge light up, okay? Give us that $10 million. We'll make it light up. That's what happens, okay? I don't need you telling me about we got to build housing that has to have a profit. Why do we have to have a profit? All the stuff that you've done over the years doesn't have a profit, but we got a new rule in town now. Well, it's got to be profitable. No, it doesn't. We're government. We're not business. I thought we were Democrats. That's what we tell the Republicans. When they talk about all this stuff about how we get the bottom line, we're supposed to be servicing people. It is something wrong when we have a whole part of the city that's not getting services, that's not getting built. We shouldn't put any more money in the Central Quarter. It all should be going to mostly North St. Louis and parts of South St. Louis. That's where it should be going, okay? There shouldn't be any tax abatement, TIFs, any of it. The reason why it is because we got a chair now that lives in the Central Quarter. For many years, he was the chair of parks. But we got a chair that's in the Central Quarter. He was getting his stuff because we had a mayor that lived in the Central Quarter. Then we had a mayor from North St. Louis for 4 years. Then we had a mayor that lived in 6th Ward, South St. Louis. Then we got a mayor that's in the Central Quarter. All the things that's called the Central Quarter. Central Quarter, Central Quarter, Central Quarter. All the money was going there. Even when we had a mayor in North St. Louis, he did not get how important it was that we do things in North St. Louis. We did a few little things more, but did not get, or did not want to put that political push in there, so we got nothing done. And so now we're at this point where we're making these rules for future projects based on how great this is with this horrible, horrible map. I'm embarrassed to look at it. We should put this on every channel in the city of St. Louis and talk about how embarrassed we are, what a failure we are as a city, that we would have a whole section looking like this with a whole red and purple, because you haven't invested anything. You haven't spent any of that money. And I dare anybody to go look at our applications and then look at how we spent the money. How do you apply for a house loan and then you spend it someplace else? They put you in jail when you do that. In fact, just to go down memory lane again, there were some people who went to jail about the block grant money, went to jail while their wives worked at SLDC CDA, okay? So there were some people because they misused this money at will, and they used it, and now they have built it up, and they say, well, look at us, how great we are. Put that kind of money in my neighborhood, it'd be that great too. In fact, I don't even need that much, and it'll be great. It's great already. I don't like the term weaker neighborhoods. That's a code word. Please keep it. I think your neighborhood is weaker, Alderman from the 17th. My neighborhood is just fine. Only thing wrong with it is racism. That's what's wrong with it. Okay, you said, there's something else you said here. That we have to have a predictable outcome. Why do we have to have a predictable outcome now? Why haven't we ever had to have a predictable outcome all of these times? What if the outcome is to have housing for people to live in, decent housings, to build up a neighborhood? And sometimes at first you may not have a profit at building this, but if you keep building these neighborhoods up that you tore up, and not just concentrate on we're going to do the 4th Ward and build low-income housing, because the whole time that we were doing stuff at low-income housing in North St. Louis, funny thing is, over in the 23rd Ward, go over there off of Arsenal, and when Francis Slade was the alderman of the 3rd, they built nice new middle-income housing over there. They've done it in many of the South St. Louis wards. They wasn't low income, but somehow if we live in North St. Louis and we're middle income, that we aren't supposed to build any middle income housing. Well, that's what happens to neighborhoods. When you do not feed the neighborhood at all, and you decide that all of North St. Louis is low income, and you do not feed and build it up, then that's what happened. Imagine if you didn't feed your child for 20 or 30 or 40 years. Then you show up and the other people's children are all fat and bouncy, and then you say, well, look at those people. They didn't take care of their kids. You took all the money from the kids that were supposed to have it. In this case, you took it from the neighborhoods. Now you're giving me this thing and telling me what a great ideal it is, and how we're going to now have projects, and we're going to have rules about what should get tax abatement. We should have rules what should not get anything. We should start with the 17th Ward. I mean, and then the more you get more. I look at them opening up a new Metrolink station. They have to go across North St. Louis, ladies and gentlemen, to get Metrolink to the Central Quarter from the airport. I'm sitting here. I'm the only person that lives in North St. Louis who's here, because the aldermen from the 17th and 18th live in the Central Quarter. But I live in North St. Louis. We cut a deal, North and South St. Louis aldermen. We were going to get a North-South distributor. Where is it? We don't have it all these many years, 20-something years later. But the people who didn't want it, the Claytons in the Central Quarter, Clayton didn't want it. They got all kind of, not only Metrolink, they also have all these stations. They have all these added stations, because the more you put money into something, the better it becomes. Yes, it's better. Yes, it's better, but it's not better because it was so great in the first place. It's better because you gave attention to it and you gave money to it. I am opposed to anything that says that we have to have a predictable outcome. Now, if you want to say that for the Central Quarter, and you want to say that for South St. Louis, yes. I am not voting for anything that has a predictable outcome in North St. Louis, because that's not what we need now. We need to put money in it and pour it in at the rate that we did for the next 25 years. Put the money in North St. Louis and some parts of South St. Louis. And I want to say this, and there's some parts even in the 16th Ward, because I lived south for a lot of times. Put some money in stabilizing some of their business districts and things like that. Don't put the money all in one place and then expect, because if you don't stabilize wonderful neighborhoods that's over by the Target, if you don't make sure you fix up the business districts there, that also will go down, okay? We deserve some of the things that everybody else has had in a certain part of town. How do you build a whole downtown at the expense of a whole North St. Louis? How do you do that? And then talk about how great and wonderful things are. This is a mess. I want to read something that's on page 5. It talks about, on the conclusion, after you apply for tax abatement, that they will do an evaluation, and then that will be shared with the alderperson of the ward. Then the conclusion shall be included in a resolution to be considered by the LCRA board. If approved, then the LCRA resolution shall be sent to the board. LCRA is just a recommendation. They don't get to tell us what to do. They're not elected officials. We let them have all of our power. They can say, I do not recommend it, and we still can introduce a board bill. I don't want to give them any such power that they can make the determination of what we do or not, okay? They're not elected. They don't take responsibility for it. So at the end of the day, they can say, I don't like it all they want to. Send the resolution and send the board bill over here, and then let the aldermen who are responsible for their wards do this. I've been going over this thing for the last couple of months since this was introduced. I went through back and forth, and I called people and I asked questions. And the question that I asked is, what is the benefit for North St. Louis? Where is our benefit? Where is the guarantee about how much money will come here? Where is the assurance that we will get any money? It's not any more than it was. And where's the assurance that we will have these people who work over at LRA, CDA, SLDC? Where's the assurance that they will spend the majority of their time making sure that this map no longer looks like this? This is an embarrassment. There's no assurance anyplace. That's just a little cover to say, look what we're doing, and we're going to do what we've always done. We're going to steal stuff from black people. We're going to use their slavery, their labor, and everything else, and then we're going to stand on and say, well, now we're going to change things, but we're going to keep everything that we stole, everything that we've been able to take, everything that we've misappropriated, everything that we've been able to use, and then we're going to say, well, now we got rules and regulations. The Alderman from the 17th talked about but for. There is but for test with TIF. There is a but for the fact that there was a TIF, you would not be able to build it. The only TIFs that they were able to get turned down was the one that I got turned down for Snooks. We went over to the TIF and we lobbied against my own TIF because my project went from 30 acres to 10 acres. And the mayor of the time got overruled and the TIF commission said, no, we don't need a TIF. But other than that, mostly, they say, yep, we need it. One of the problems we have is we no longer have an independent school board. We were not supposed to be having the governor, the mayor, and the president of the board of aldermen over the school board. It used to be the school board would come to this board of aldermen and lobby against TIFs. They had a lobbyist. After we had the mayor, the governor, and the president, they were on board with the TIFs. That makes no sense at all, because that's opposition to our St. Louis public schools to give out all these TIFs. We continue to do this stuff, and again, I want to say, I'm so disappointed that we don't come with a real rule that says we're not going to do anything but the smallest amount of anything else in these wards where they have had enough. They've had enough. You don't need any more incentive. And we're going to give 100%. I don't care if you give 200%. I don't care if you buy the land and build it. I'm working on a hardware store now, folks. I don't care if the city buys the land, build it. Oh, and do just like what they did with the sports team. Call up one of the hardware people and say, we're going to let you live here for free. We're going to let you do business here for free, because the service of having a hardware store is important. I know the importance because I was here when Geraldine and others pushed to get the one that's down on South Kings Highway. I ardently supported it. I went down there, even though I had moved to North St. Louis, and supported that hardware store, that Home Depot, because I was so happy that we were getting another hardware store. I had gone to Central Hardware, and that was going away. And so for us to have a whole part of the town that can list a whole litany of things that we don't have, sit-down restaurants, we don't have hardware stores, that's the city of St. Louis doing that on purpose. That is not black aldermen because we are lazy and shiftless and don't want to do it. That's the city, because we're not in charge of them. And that's one of the things I'm teaching my community now. When the grass is not cut, it's not the alderman, it's the mayor of the city of St. Louis, because ultimately she didn't put enough in the budget and the prior one before that to cut grass. That's not the alderman. And all these things are not getting done in the city of St. Louis. And the reason why we don't have development, and now we come with these fake means of trying to make sure that you keep everything you have, so we can say we have something, look what we're doing, but you're going to keep doing right what you're doing. And unless we have something to prevent you from doing any more, the main sponsor of this bill is the main culprit of what's wrong with the city of St. Louis. Not that he shouldn't, and I'm not saying he shouldn't try to have things in his ward. That is not what I'm saying. But he knows how much he's gotten. And the city of St. Louis, the mayors and everything else know how much the money's been spent downtown in Central Quarter. And they should be saying no, and they should be telling the people over there to spend their times on stuff that they're supposed to be spending it on, which is to build up neighborhoods where people live. And then we could have a real city. Don't expect that to be happening, but I'm going to be asking for a roll call so I can vote a loud no. And I hope that we do come at some point, maybe that we come to a point where we have some real concern about all of St. Louis. And don't tell me anything about I gotta make a reasonable outcome if I build something in certain parts of the city. I don't want you to have any more outcome than you had when 25, 30 years ago you start pouring all the money into Central Quarter and downtown. I want you to pour the money into it, and I guarantee you when you pour the money into it, people will use it. Every place and everything that I have built in what was the 20th Ward, the people all over the community use it because they don't have much else. And I think that's sad that we continue to follow this nonsense of we're updating and doing something better. We're covering up for what we've already done with the pretense that we're doing something better. It is not better. It is not good for North St. Louis, and we should not have it.
Alderwoman from the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Would the alderman from the 17th yield for questions?
Alderman from the 17th, will yield to the Alderman from the 15th?
Certainly.
Alderman from the 15th, please proceed.
Just a couple of quick questions. Could you walk us through the enforcement mechanisms to ensure that this is actually followed? And then what happens if the things that are outlined in here are not followed?
Alderwoman, this is a resolution, so there is no binding, it's not legally binding. It's intended to be a guidebook, a map.
If it is a guidebook, then it doesn't necessarily have to be followed.
I think that's certainly the case.
Okay.
The idea is that we set this up. Alderwoman, we can make it an ordinance, but all it takes is 15 votes and a signature of the mayor to create exceptions to the ordinance. So an ordinance would be somewhat potentially as meaningless as a resolution would be. It's only as meaningful as we as a board are willing to try to adhere to it.
Thank you. No further questions. That was the point that I just, I wanted to make here, that, while I do think that there are some good aspects of this in trying to bring some unanimity to a process right now that is very much done on a case-by-case basis, I think we also need to be very clear and intentional with the way that this is talked about and portrayed to the public, that this is not binding, and that this is a guide, this is recommendations, and at the end of the day, there's nothing that legally enforces us to follow anything that's in here. And so I hope that a lot of the things that are in here are followed. And if they're not, I hope that as a body we come back and figure out the fixes that we need to do, whether through codifying something or additional resolutions, to ensure that we actually do abide by reform in our city. So thank you.
Alderman from the 24th.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are the enforcement mechanism of this. This is our resolution that has gone through a committee of the Board of Aldermen that was approved, and every tax abatement bill goes through a committee where the Board of Aldermen votes, and then it comes out here to the floor where we all vote on it again. So we have the ability to enforce this on every single bill, and I hope we have the intent to enforce it. It'll be easy going forward to enforce it, because all we have to do is look up where the address is on this map, and if it doesn't comply with the map, which I expect us to approve hopefully, we can ask the alderman, what's the deal? How come your bill is special compared to all the other bills? I'll also say, what would be another enforcement mechanism, right? And if you attempted to make this an ordinance, an incentive bill, a blighting study, a tax abatement bill trumps that ordinance. There's no way to make a policy legally binding other than to just follow the policy, right? So yesterday we had no policy. There was no standard which we based these decisions on. Every decision was ad hoc, was done based on whatever criteria we thought we liked that day. Here is a set of criteria based on the real world, the facts on the ground, the data from the Census Bureau, from reporting agencies talking about where mortgages are issued, the value of homes, all that stuff. We're putting that in. We can update that every year, and we can follow it. And if we decide in a year or 2 years that this is the wrong policy, we can have another debate about a different policy. But we've been developing this policy at the board for years now, and it's our job to enforce it. And I hope that is the message that gets to the public, that it's on us to do it. It's our responsibility. And certainly as long as I'm here, I intend to stick to this, and I know many of my colleagues do as well. Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion? Alderman from the first.
Excuse me. I was having a little conversation over here. I want to make something clear why I'm so opposed to this thing about probability of that you make a profit. When you have depressed a community for many years to build that community up, the values are depressed. They're not going to sell The houses are not going to sell for what they should be. Now, if the city of St. Louis wants to take responsibility and say, since we know we were racist and that we depress these communities, so if we build a $150,000 house, as long as you keep certain things in place, we will guarantee that your house sells for $150,000. Put an insurance policy in place, then you will get that. And in fact, the alderman from the 21st know that I brought that up in our meeting about how to do dollar houses or set up a program about houses, which I had written something many years ago. But when you come to a community that you've depressed the values, you're not going to sell the houses at the cost that you have to build them, okay? So to have that kind of language or talk about the probability makes no sense. Then that basically, you can tell the communities, I'm not building anything there, because where would I get my value from? When I bought my house back 32 years ago, one of the things we used to do at our community was that we would go and we would compare the cost of my house, which is a 5-bedroom brick house, and then we would compare what it would sell in South St. Louis. Because here's the thing that happens in black communities. People first of all the redlining and stuff like that has happened, but also people have this assumption, well, it's a black community, and it becomes a fulfillment. The only people who want to buy is black people, so therefore it doesn't have a value. Okay, and so that further depresses the value. So that's the kind of thing that happens when you're putting these kind of things in places. I don't want to enforce this, and for the alderman from the 24th to talk about we go enforce it, we don't never enforce it. We go right along and do the same things. And the alderman from the 24th said he's leaving now, and so he knows what happens in the city of St. Louis. So if the mayor comes through here and says she gets her 15, 20 votes for something he needs, we will not enforce this, and we do not. So there's no need to then put something in place talking about that we want to make sure that we have value. So you're telling every North Side ward that we're not building anything in your ward. Why would I want to support something like that? Stupidity at its utmost. No, no, no. Unless you're going to put an insurance policy in there that says, I'll build you a $200,000 house or $300,000, and then we'll guarantee it. In order to bring up neighborhoods, you have to put money in them the same way you did with downtown, and keep bringing them up and keep putting that money in it and keep doing it until you build the value back up. Then you have a value. You don't tell me, well, we're going to start with where we are now. No, that will not get it. So that's why it was so important to me. I didn't explain it enough. I do real estate, so I understand stuff sometimes, but I needed to explain that. You cannot. You can't go in the 4th Ward and build $150,000 houses. The houses are selling for $40,000, and then say, well, we can't build it because it can't sell for $140,000, and we're building it for that, and we need to make a profit. That is not what you can do. Okay, and as I said before, we have 5 solid middle-class black wards over here that other people don't know in North St. Louis. And all these years, what the city has not done is support those neighborhoods, and because those black people over there vote, and they don't tend to vote for the people that was in power.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 17th, you recognize close.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to address a couple of the comments made by the Alderwoman from the 1st. I have to admit the Alderwoman first has a remarkable way of making everything about redistricting from 10 years ago. At some point, I hope to...
Alderman from the 17th.
I'd be curious to sometime learn how the Titanic was responsible for the redistricting of 15 years ago. But despite that, there was actually in all of that 45 minutes or so that she spoke one comment that I think was valid, and that was the issue of profitability. When I mentioned profitability, the intent there was that the model looks at the profitability of a project with the idea that the city will make money on it, and this is particularly geared for projects that are associated with commercial. We are very cognizant of the fact that we are government and we have some responsibilities to those who perhaps do not have, aren't as blessed financially as others, and there actually is an exclusion in this on page 5 that talks about granting abatement for income restricted housing, and I believe that's intended to reflect our desire to be sensitive to all of those in our community. The Alderwoman from the first said that what a great study it was. We started this process with a study, and I think the study demonstrated how bad we were, and I think our effort was to go ahead and try to address some of those issues. The Alderwoman from the first talked a lot about the development in the Central Corridor. I can tell you that 30 years ago when I first came down here, we were using block grant money in neighborhoods like Forest Park Southeast, and we were not only granting them tax abatement, but we were granting them large subsidies from CDA to plug that gap, and that's no longer the case. Many of the blocks in Forest Park Southeast and the West End 30 years ago that were getting block grant money stopped getting block grant money probably 10 or 15 years ago, and as those neighborhoods have progressed and stabilized, they are now not getting any incentives for smaller residential projects under $1 million. Much of the incentives that have been provided in the Central Corridor are actually job-related. This 17th Ward has about 50,000 jobs. Downtown has about 100,000. The people who work in those jobs live throughout the whole city. When we opened IKEA, there was 300 jobs there, and I saw a report that showed that every ward in the city had someone working at IKEA. The jobs that are in Cortex have thousands of people working in them. As an example, one of them is I think this is fairly reflective. One of them is a gentleman by the name of Travis Sheridan, who's in Old North St. Louis, who is a community leader up there, and he is working in Cortex, and the program that he heads up has brought him national, if not international, recognition for his work at his job in Cortex. The Alderwoman from the first said that there's this kind of wanton neglect, if not deliberate, attempts to undermine development in the north side, and yet as I sat down here and listened to the debate on NGA, it was the Alderwoman from the first ward who spoke against NGA, which would have brought 3,000 jobs in North St. Louis and hopefully would have redeveloped the area around it. We are all in this together, North St. Louis, South St. Louis, and the Central Corridor. If we all can't work together, I'm really fearful for our city's future. And with that, I would like to conclude my remarks and renew my motion that we pass Resolution 104, Committee Substitute as amended, floor substitute.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 17th, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th. There's been a request for roll call. So what's before us is the adoption of Resolution 10, the floor substitute for Resolution 104. Again, wait a minute. So what's before us is the adoption of the second reading of resolutions. It's been moved by the Alderman from the 17th, seconded by the Alderman for the 10th. It's been a request for roll call. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Kotar. Alderwoman Rice. Alderman Gunther. Alderman Vollmer. Alderwoman Martin. Alderman Ornowitz. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Green. Alderman Odenberg. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Muhammad. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaquero.
Hold on a second. Alderman.
Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaquero. Alderman Ogilvy. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderwoman Navarro. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Martin. Alderman Ornowitz. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Oh, I thought he said that. Okay, okay, so that was it, right? Alderman Rhodey? Alderwoman Davis? Alderman Boyd? Alderman Jeffrey Boyd?
Alderman Boyd, please, aye. Yeah, perfect, thanks.
Alderman Vaquero? Alderman Cone, you said aye, right? Alderman Williamson? Alderwoman Boyd? 20 aye votes and 1 no vote.
By a vote, you sustain the motion of the Alderman from the 17th and adopted Resolution 104, floor substitute.
That is the extent of second reading of the resolution.
Miscellaneous unfinished business.
We have none.
Announcements.
Monday, October 29th, Public and Utilities meeting, 6:30 p.m. in the Kennedy Room. Tuesday, Public Safety meeting, 10 a.m. in the Kennedy Room. And Friday is the full board meeting, 10 a.m. in the chambers. That is the extent of the announcements.
Any further announcements? Alderman from the 22nd.
Members of the board, I'd like to announce a streets, track, and refuge for 9 a.m. on Tuesday. I'd like to wish my mother a 75th birthday tomorrow.
Happy birthday to her.
All right. And I also want to say happy anniversary for my wife, who will let me stay with her for at least 28 years tomorrow.
Whoa, congratulations.
And we will be celebrating both my mom's 75th birthday and our anniversary tonight at the Best Place from 6 to 10. So if you'd like to stop by and wish us well as we move forward on our journey, continue to move forward on our journeys of life. It's 5736 Martin Luther King Drive, right at Martin Luther King and Goodfellow, just east of Goodfellow.
Hey, thank you. Alderwoman from 27.
I wanted to announce the 27th Ward Community Action Day Town Hall meeting. It will be October the 27th from 10 a.m. to 12 noon at Northwest High School. We'll have our honored guests as Congressman Lacey Clay and Louis Reed will be in attendance. And after that, we'll have a Peace and Power Party in the Gregory J. Carter Park. It's an opportunity for the neighbors to contribute to a new public art project that we're doing.
All right, thank you. Alderwoman from the 1st. All right, Alderman from the 9th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to quickly announce that as of today, my executive assistant, Michelle Knox, will be moving down the hallway. So I just want to take a quick second to say that in the last year and a half that she has been a right hand to me, and I wanted to thank her. I asked her to come out, but I think that this is a emotional day. So I would just want to say that everyone should go by, say thank you to Michelle Knox for her service, and thank you very much if she's listening in the back. So thank you.
Yeah, Michelle has done a great job. Let's give her a big round of applause. Alderwoman from the 1st.
Something the alderman said about that. I make everything about redistricting. He sounds just like the slave owners when the slave said, "You made me a slave." When you take my vote away and that from my community, please know I am never going to let it be. Long as he's on this board, or you for that matter, those people who voted to take my vote away, that you violated my voting rights. And I am here to represent my community who wants that to be brought up. That's the thing that we still talk about, because you don't care because you got to vote in 2013, but we did not. So for those of you all who don't want to hear it, go back and fix it, then you won't hear it. But as long as you don't fix it and things are taken from me, you sound like Kavanaugh. I don't remember what I did to her. Of course you don't, Miss Massa Joe Rody, but I remember. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman from the 2nd.
I would just like to wish one of my youngest constituents a happy birthday. Cree Autumn Middlebrook turned 1 today, so happy birthday.
Oh, yeah, happy birthday. Any further announcements from the 21st, sir?
Hey, thank you, Mr. President. I just want to announce that tomorrow, North Newstead Association will be hosting its 2nd annual Crime Prevention Summit. It will be held at the O'Fallon Park YMCA starting at 9 o'clock a.m. Director Edwards and Commissioner Hayden will be presenting on their efforts and measures to prevent crime in our city. And I would invite everybody to come out. Again, it's hosted by North Newstead Association, and it's tomorrow at 9 o'clock a.m. at the O'Fallon Park Recreational YMCA.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Very quickly, I wanted to congratulate the residents of the 19th Ward and all their efforts. We had no nuisance write-ups in the last 2 weeks. We've had only one property that's had more than 2 calls for nuisance problems. That says a lot about our whole ward. Thank you.
Yeah. Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on the motion to excuse.
President, members of the board, I move that we excuse the Alderman from the 5th, the 23rd, the 3rd, and the 11th for necessary absence.
Moved by the Alderman from the 18th, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on the motion to adjourn.
Mr. President, members of the board, I move that the board adjourns until Friday, November 2nd, 10 a.m.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 18th. I entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 10th. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Stand adjourned.